There's only one person in Star Trek who Picard held a grudge over for 31 years. Captain Jean-Luc Picard, Patrick Stewart, was not one to hold grudges. But one betrayal on Star Trek, The Next Generation, hit Jean-Luc so hard that he remained upset for over 30 years. Although Jean-Luc Picard cared deeply about his crew members aboard the USS Enterprise D, he kept himself emotionally distant from them. Picard devoted his life to Starfleet because he truly believed in Starfleet's mission, and he did his best to uphold their ideals. Picard had to learn the hard way that not every Starfleet officer shared his faith in the organization. When Star Trek The Next Generation began, Gene Roddenberry envisioned no major conflicts among the Starship Enterprise's crew. This rule was limiting from a storytelling perspective, but it became more lax as the show progressed. Early in TNG Season 5, a new confrontational character joined Star Trek The Next Generation's cast, shaking up the established dynamic of the crew. Throughout his years as captain of the Enterprise, Picard was assimilated by the Borg, tortured by Cardassians, and regularly went up against the omnipotent Q, John Delancey, but no one got under his skin quite like Ensign Ro Laren, Michelle Forbes. Introduced in the aptly titled Star Trek The Next Generation Season 5 episode, Ensign Ro Laren was a different kind of Starfleet officer. Prior to joining the crew of the Enterprise D, Ro had been court-martialed and stripped of her rank after a particularly disastrous away mission left 8 officers dead. Many of the Enterprise's crew members were unsure about Ro, but Captain Picard saw something in her. Soon after Ro was promoted to lieutenant, she took on an assignment to infiltrate the rebel group known as the Maquis. She gained the trust of the Maquis, but soon came to sympathize with their cause. When it came time to lure the Maquis into a trap set by the Federation, Ro sided with the rebels and left Starfleet behind. With the Maquis, Ro said she had found a place where she felt like she belonged, and her only regret was disappointing Captain Picard. Perhaps because Picard had been something of a rebel in his youth too, he took Ro's betrayal personally. Picard had formed an image in his mind of the great Starfleet officer Ro could be, and he was devastated when she chose a different path, one that he felt betrayed everything Starfleet stood for. Star Trek Picard Season 3 saw the return of Star Trek The Next Generation's original crew as they reunited with Admiral Picard for one more adventure. After Admiral Picard and Captain William Riker, Jonathan Frakes, commandeer the USS Titan A to rescue Dr. Beverly Crusher, Gates McFadden, Commander Ro came aboard to warn Jean-Luc about the changeling threat to the Federation. Picard still harbored anger about Ro's betrayal, but Ro pointed out that Picard had wanted her to be someone she was not. Both Ro and Picard lamented that they had missed out on years of friendship. In a season full of strong stories, Ro and Picard's confrontation was one of the best of Star Trek Picard's final run. Not only was it nice to see the characters finally get to express their feelings to one another, but Ro also played a crucial role in getting Picard information about the changeling conspiracy. Tragically, Ro was killed while leaving the Titan, but Picard acknowledges that he finally saw her as she was. Considering characters regularly return from the dead on Star Trek, it remains to be seen whether Ro will pop up again. Either way, Star Trek Picard provided a satisfying conclusion to her Star Trek The Next Generation story, resolving Jean-Luc's grudge with Ro. In the vast and rich universe of Star Trek, where diplomacy, unity, and the exploration of the unknown take precedence, few characters have left as indelible a mark on fans and lore as Jean-Luc Picard. Portrayed by Patrick Stewart, Captain Picard of the USS Enterprise has been an enduring symbol of leadership, compassion, and wisdom. However, as measured and thoughtful as Picard often appears, even he is not immune to deep-seated grudges. One particular person haunted Picard for decades, and it took 31 years for him to confront this bitterness: Lieutenant Commander Jack Crusher. At first glance, it might seem odd that Jack Crusher, a fellow Starfleet officer and one-time close friend, would be the subject of such a long-standing resentment. After all, Picard is a man who advocates for understanding and peace, often serving as the voice of reason. But the history between Picard and Crusher is one marked by tragedy, guilt, and an unspoken love triangle, one that made their relationship far more complicated than most. To understand this grudge, we need to explore the backstory of Jack Crusher, his untimely death, and his connection to Beverly Crusher, Jack's widow and the Enterprise's chief medical officer, as well as Picard's longtime colleague and secret love. The bond between Picard and Jack Crusher and Jean-Luc Picard served together in Starfleet long before the events of Star Trek: The Next Generation. They were more than just comrades in arms, they were friends. This bond deepened further because of Beverly, who Jack eventually married. While serving together on the USS Stargazer, a fateful event would change everything. During a mission under Picard's command, Jack Crusher lost his life. Though the details surrounding Jack's death are shrouded in mystery, one thing was clear: Picard was the commanding officer when it happened. The burden of command weighs heavily on all captains, but it is particularly poignant for Picard, who carries the memory of losing his friend in the line of duty. While outwardly composed, Picard's guilt over Jack's death runs deep. Despite Starfleet's acceptance of the incident as a tragedy of war, Picard never fully absolved himself. In a sense, his grudge wasn't so much against Jack Crusher himself, but against the memory of his own perceived failure and the consequences it wrought. The complicated relationship with Beverly Crusher, adding to the complexity of Picard's grudge, was his relationship with Beverly Crusher. In the years following Jack's death, Beverly became a critical part of Picard's life. As the chief medical officer aboard the USS Enterprise, Beverly and Picard worked closely together. Yet underneath their professional rapport was an unspoken affection, a romantic tension that simmered for years but was never fully acted upon. Picard's feelings for Beverly, coupled with the fact that she was Jack's widow, complicated his emotional landscape. How could he reconcile his affection for her when the shadow of Jack Crusher's death lingered between them? Picard's moral integrity prevented him from pursuing a romantic relationship with Beverly, as he felt the weight of guilt and responsibility for Jack's loss. This internal conflict fed his emotional grudge, locking him in a cycle of self-recrimination and unfulfilled longing. Though Beverly herself harbored no ill will toward Picard for Jack's death, indeed, she held him in high esteem, it was clear that Jack's memory was a ghost that haunted them both, albeit in different ways. Picard's grudge was not aimed at her, nor did he resent her for her connection to Jack. Instead, it was a deeply personal struggle, one that remained unresolved for years. 31 years of silence, the grudge that Picard held onto for 31 years was a mixture of guilt, unresolved emotions, and the weight of command. It wasn't a bitter hatred of Jack Crusher, nor was it anger toward Beverly. Instead, it was a form of internalized blame that Picard kept hidden from others, even from himself at times. Throughout Star Trek: The Next Generation, this emotional wound manifested subtly in Picard's interactions with Beverly. Their conversations often carried an underlying tension, a sense that there was more left unsaid. Picard's professional and personal respect for her was unwavering, but his guilt over Jack's death served as a constant barrier, preventing him from fully embracing his feelings. Years passed, and despite all the life and death situations Picard faced, the weight of Jack's death remained one of his most profound burdens. It wasn't until Star Trek Picard that the unresolved feelings between Picard and Beverly were directly addressed. In the series, Picard reflects on his past and the choices he made, including the loss of Jack Crusher. This reckoning serves as a moment of catharsis for Picard, finally allowing him to release the emotional burden he had carried for so long. Letting go the grudge that Picard held wasn't a traditional one fueled by anger or betrayal. Instead, it